nutrition and mindfulness in the field. So I'm going to be talking about the importance that we place on that as we go along and expand the idea so it really reaches back home to you all. But I wanted to start off with a check-in. A check-in is something that we do in the field. It's something that we ask the students to do. And a check-in is just being present. There's no right thing to say in the check-in. In fact, it's funny because when we ask students to check in, clients to check in, sometimes they try to say the right thing. And then if we notice that, if we sense that they're just trying to give us an answer that they think that we want to hear, we pause and ask for a deeper, more honest and authentic answer. And sometimes they might be thinking about a boyfriend or girlfriend at home. They might be thinking about the meal that's coming up. They might be thinking about baseball for all I know. And part of what we say to them is okay. Like, not everybody's present all the time. And so we want you to be kind to yourself. So we want you to be present with yourselves. Having said that, where I am right now is I just finished a 3-day professional men's retreat. This is 8 men, a co-facilitator, and myself. And the fascinating thing that came out of it for me in watching and creating space for these professional men is that everything in their work, their stress, their compassion fatigue, the challenges that they're having with their children, their current relationships, everything that's going on in their life, they were able to make a connection back to their family of origin. Right? It's a constant theme. And many of them in the work that we do, because we do these kind of psychodrama workups, we do these empty chair techniques where you're talking to an empty chair, might be your mother or your father or your child or your anxiety. The fascinating piece of work that I saw often is they would bring their parents into the work, even if the challenge, the crisis, the grief, the difficulty that they were carrying around day to day was with somebody that was in their current circle, in their current relationship, maybe the family of procreation that they have, or even somebody at work. And I say that because it's a remarkable process to watch. And I can't tell you how valuable I think it is for helpers to work on their own healing. And where that really translates to you all, how that applies to you all, it's the same kind of work. Everything in my experience has taught me, as a therapist and running therapeutic programming, everything has taught me that the helpers and the parents can benefit from as much work. And almost, you know, I say this sometimes, that spending 1 hour with a parent feels like the value of spending 5 hours with the child. And it's not because it's a simple cause and effect relationship where the child is merely the result or the outcome of the parent's wise or unwise, healthy or unhealthy decisions. But it's because when that parent gets the grounding, when that therapist gets the grounding, when they get more healed, more centered, when they work on their anxiety, stress, fear, guilt, they're simply able to be more present and hear and respond to the needs of the other person. So I just want to share that with you because that's in my consciousness. That's where I am right now. And I'll tell you something else. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift to be able to do what I do and to be able to provide this for professionals, and I believe in it. And it's work. Like, it's holding space for people. It's not effortless. You get better and better at it, but it takes a lot of work. And so I was reminded of that as I came out of it today, emotionally feeling that drain. And one of the first things I did today is, I didn't have my therapy appointment until Fridays. I made my therapy appointment. I contacted my therapist, and I was able to find a spot today because I needed a place to be held, to be seen, to be understood. Right? The same kind of thing that I've been providing people. And I need to practice balance. So while this broadcast is not on self-care necessarily, it's on mindfulness, I thought it appropriate to kind of share and check in where I'm at. I'd be present with you. And also share with you, I think, the relationship between the work that we're doing with professionals and parents and how those are so similar and what kind of impact it can have on a child. So with that long preface, I'm going to go into tonight's topics. First of all, I love this quote about enlightenment, and I think it relates to the idea of mindfulness that we're going to talk about tonight. Enlightenment is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. It's seeing through the facade of pretense. It's the complete eradication of everything we imagine to be true. And I think that is something I've heard from, of course, students and clients, and something that I've heard from parents, right? That those things, that those assumptions that I came to, when I realized, when I challenged one of them, it opened up everything. And sometimes that's initially frightening because our truths, the rules, the way things are make us feel safe. And when those get removed, it can be very frightening. There's no guardrail anymore to keep us on the path. And we start wandering everywhere. I say to therapists often, part of becoming a practiced therapist is to unlearn some of the things that they taught you in graduate school, right? To learn the art of therapy, to learn your version of therapy, to learn about yourself, and have that be an essential and important part of the equation. And so this idea of mindfulness, I want to expand it. I think many of us think about mindfulness, and we have in our minds an image of somebody sitting in the lotus position in silent meditation, focusing on their breath and trying to have a nothing mind, an empty mind, no thought. And that is one practice for mindfulness. And there are many, many others. And I think there's some that are so practical that all of us do that we don't even think about. I want to tell you the story about an ultra runner. When I was, a few years ago, when I was running marathons and Ironman triathlons, I had a friend who was an ultra runner. He ran long distance races, 100-mile, 200-mile plus races. And I was just picking his brain, finding out from him about what I could learn, what nuggets did he have in training. And he said to me something interesting. He said, if you have a pain somewhere in your body when you're running, exercising, don't try to avoid it, but try to concentrate on it. Focus on it. If it's an injury, you're going to need to stop. If it's not an injury, focusing on it helps it to go away. You kind of work through it. And I think in Western culture and in our society, so often we try to avoid pain, get away from pain. Really, that's what your children are doing with all of their symptoms in many ways, just try to avoid uncomfortable feelings. And we're teaching them through the process of therapy to lean into it. So in essence, therapy itself is a mindful activity. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's going on for you? Right? What are your beliefs? What's your reaction about? Why are you yelling? Why are you fighting? Why are you using drugs? What's that for? What's that doing for you? So we're asking people to lean into the pain, right? To go do it. And the fascinating thing, this is a true story that I would not have expected. I had a nagging injury that would come up, a nagging pain, I should say, that would come up in my running preparation. And when I was running the Phoenix, Arizona Rock and Roll Marathon one year, I said to my running partner, Dave, I said, Dave, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish, so I'm just going to run my pace, and if I have to finish, I'll walk back to the finish line. I'll walk to the finish line and meet you there. Get a ride. There's trucks that go by and can pick you up. And he said, fine, and about mile 3 or 4, he took off because he was a faster paced runner, and I kept running. And about mile 8, I started to feel something. That pain came up for me. And I remember this feedback, and I focused on it. I concentrated on it. I didn't favor it. Favor it is often what creates an injury. I didn't favor it. I focused on it and thought about it, and I could not believe it. After 5 minutes or so, as far as my memory serves me, after about 5 minutes or so, it just went away. And I finished that particular race my fastest ever. So there's something about working through it, about walking straight through our grief in this process. Learning to feel is a simple way that I describe therapy, and it relates to this physical idea. Learning to appreciate the non-toothache. Thich Nhat Hanh, a very prolific Buddhist teacher, says the first thing that a toothache reminds us of is the non-toothache. The minute we have a toothache, we become aware that we've been taking the non-toothache for granted. And so mindfulness is a pause to think and feel about what's going on with us. Physically, emotionally, mentally, what's going on with us? What is happening with us? And just being with it. And in order to do that effectively, we have to practice non-judgment. right? We have to see it as it is. In early practices of mindful training, oftentimes they'll tell you just observe your thoughts. If your thoughts are racing, they call it the monkey mind, going all over the place, just look at that, listen to that, pay attention to that, and gently, if you're able to, bring yourself back to the practice, whether it be a guided meditation or back to your breath. And notice how able you are to do that without judgment in the process. And again, that practice of being gentle with yourself is at the root and the foundation of our idea of therapy at Evoke. Our idea that we don't want to beat up people that are hurting. We don't want to punish people that are hurting, attack people that are hurting. We want to understand people that are hurting, be gentle with them, kind enough to them, even if their behavior is frightening, unkind, if it requires patience, if it's a lot for us to hold. We try to develop enough capacity to hold it, to see it, and then to listen to what it has to teach us. And what we all learn is that all the defenses, all the behaviors, all the symptoms, if we treat them this way, we can find their source, the original wound or fear or sense of being threatened in this world. And then we hold on to that, we honor that, we respect it, and then they bring to bear their own ability to work through it and to heal themselves. Attacking the defenses is the opposite, right? Going at it. Young therapists, including myself, often would just point right at the defense. You're being defensive. You're justifying. You're rationalizing, right? Maybe even too quickly going to the wound. This is because of your relationship with your father or your mother. Instead of this gentler process that really does have legs, that really does make a difference that is able to be sustained. It's a process. So learning to appreciate the non-toothache is the idea of paying attention to things when they don't hurt. And having a toothache reminds us of that. Not being angry at your anger. Sit with your anger. Follow it. What is it trying to tell you? I love the work of Harriet Lerner because she offers the idea that anger is effective when we allow it to tell us something about ourselves. Something we need to do differently in our lives. Set a different boundary. Make a different choice. Stand in a different place. So listen to your anger. And if your anger is bigger than the situation, think about this with your child. If your anger from your child seems bigger than the situation, don't tell them it's bigger than the situation. Be curious about why is it bigger than the situation. In Al-Anon, they say, if it's hysterical, it's historical. Right? Some wound from their past is being repeated, recreated, touched on. Something unresolved. Telling our children they're too sensitive, they're being too dramatic, they're exaggerating their response doesn't help. It's not this way of non-judgment, but rather saying, I'm very curious. Even in your own words, I will say to them sometimes, you're saying that you're reacting bigger than the situation should suggest. If that's true, then why? Let's sit and think if we can discover it together. See if we can discover it together. Learning the nature of the other's suchness is this idea in Buddhism about learning to see the other. What is their dilemma with life? It's hard as a parent. It's hard as a professional sometimes. But it's particularly hard as a parent to sit in the place where we see somebody else's suchness. But, and I'll get to this by the end, the best way to do that is to find one's own suchness. And you can do that through mindfulness. The more that you look at yourself, look into yourself, observe yourself, see yourself, be present with yourself, be yourself, the more capable you are of seeing the other's suchness. Taking care of yourself is taking care of the world. Right? The world, and I was just talking to Alex, my moderator, before you all jumped on. That's my lesson from today. I had a wonderful men's intensive retreat that I hosted and facilitated. I loved it. It was beautiful. The men were beautiful. And it was work for me, a lot of work. It was work for them, I'm sure, a different kind of work. But what I ought to have done, what I'm learning from today is I shouldn't have scheduled this webinar for tonight. Right? I should have given myself a night off. I should have scheduled very few or no appointments at all today and had the day off. Should have stared at the wall. Because I want to give that gift of therapy to people. I want to be able to do that for my children, hold that space for them and for my wife. And if I don't do that, I can't give my gifts. My bandwidth is going to be taxed, and I'm going to be unable, and oftentimes then become abusive to myself. Too much eating, too much drinking, too much escapism, self-medicating in whatever way that I do that. Right? So taking care of yourself is taking care of the world. And I saw a piece of work this week that I thought was powerful, and I won't get into any of the details, but what came out of it for me when I was listening to one of these men do a piece of work was this idea that I'm reminded of very often, which is setting a boundary does have its benefits for your children, right? Setting a boundary with your child absolutely has benefits, but setting a boundary essentially is good self-care. Setting a boundary is for you. But because we're so shame-based, because we cannot conceive of the value and the okayness with taking care of ourselves, we try to make it about the other person. I did this for your own good. See the benefit, right? Therapists will even say to you, therapists in the treatment field will say to you, what your child needs is boundaries. You don't have good boundaries. You're enabling and you're rescuing. What I say is, that may be true that the boundaries might be struggling, but that's not the problem. The problem is the shame. The problem is the lack of self-care. The lack of boundaries is just evidence of that. Right? It's evidence for me, in me, of a lack of self, of a lack of being, of a lack of me showing up in a relationship. So taking care of yourself is synonymous with taking care of the world. And we will have to do battle. All of us will have to do battle with shame and guilt. We're going to feel guilty. We're going to feel ashamed when we practice healthy self-care. Giving birth to the therapist and the child. I think one thing that's easier for me in doing these professional retreats, and I want to take this from this experience this week. I was thinking to myself, in some ways, the process with these men was easier than it has been in a long time for me. It was work, but on another level, it was easy. I wasn't anxious or stressed or believing that I had to pull a rabbit out of a hat or look into my crystal ball. I just listened and listened to what they had to say, and then showed it back to them. And I was thinking to myself, what was it? And there were a few variables, but one of the variables was they were all therapists. And so I had this kind of automatic confidence that they could be their own resource, that I didn't need to give them the truth, that they could find it. And I think that's true with all of us to some degree. Right? That's where the name of O comes from, to pull out of the person their own wisdom and strength. And it's a process, and a guide can help you pull it out. But finding that wisdom, finding that story, learning to see them, learning to listen, learning to create a process that evokes their wisdom, their strength, their message. And it takes a listening ear, a presence to do that. I love this idea. I've told this story before about a master composer. It may have been Beethoven. I'm not sure. But this story is told that this master composer played a beautiful sonata before the king and the court. And somebody asked from the court, what did that mean? And the master composer sat down and played it again. This idea of just being with it. A Buddhist teacher is famous for when he was asked the question, what's their dogma? And he responds, we don't have dogma, we dance. Right? We just are. That's our practice, to be. I had a professional retreat that just came to me years ago at a previous company. where we're supposed to come up with mission statements for ourselves. And I was thinking about mine and thinking about making it simple, and I finally came up with to be. I want to just be me, right? Be okay with that. And then with that would come, of course, all of my wisdom, all of my love, all of my compassion, all of my limitations. But I wanted to that was what I was striving was to be. And I got scolded for that I didn't understand the assignment. Didn't understand what I was being asked. I still hold to it though, as you can see. We adjust the diet. This slide is off. We adjust the diet for religious and dietary restrictions. That should have been on another slide. I apologize. So some other practices: yoga, tai chi, guided imagery. Learning to there can be somatic and body work, right? Learning to feel what your body's trying to tell you, where you're storing your fear, your pain, going to it, concentrating on it, and try to listen to it. It sounds very hokey to some people. It sounds very new age, but there is emergent science, and I will share some with you tonight. There's emerging science that is catching up with this intuitive, thousands of year old practice. I read a book years ago called Living Your Yoga. The idea that yoga is a practice. We go to a yoga studio, or we might do yoga at home, self-directed. But it really is a way of being with yourself, loving yourself, non-judgment. When I go to yoga, I am drawn to try to compare myself to the woman or gentleman next to me who looks much better than I do at the pose. And the fact that I can only do some poses halfway or a quarter of the way. And I want to go to that judgmental place. I don't want to even show up sometimes, because that person who's much more practiced at it than me is going to trigger in me that shame that I need to measure up. And most of the yoga instructors I've had are wise enough teachers to be gentle with me, to tell me that I can be where I'm at, and to gently evoke in me that kind of compassion for myself. These are tools that they can take with them, which I love, right? People always ask, what do you give them that lasts? There's the communication tools, right? There might be anger de-escalation tools, lots of ideas, reframes, but taking the mindfulness practices with them can be helpful. Mantra and affirmation meditations. That's one meditation that I use very often when I'm feeling very anxious, worried, when I'm worried about how I'm going to be viewed or how I'm going to perform, or when something is unsure in my life. I try to repeat the mantra, I'm going to be okay, everything is going to be okay. I haven't experienced so far that everything's okay. I've had very tough times, I've had losses, I've had stressors, but I'm okay. And I forget that sometimes, so I have to remind myself of that. And we ask kids to develop their own. Body scans, mindful walks, quiet walks, just asking them to be present with themselves and silent. Mindfulness moments can be called in some of the groups. The group stops what they're doing and spends a few seconds, typically anywhere from 10 seconds to a minute, observing whatever thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations they might be having at the moment. They're giving a chance to speak out loud on what is going on for them. A check-in, like I said earlier, if they are moved to do so. I think that the I feel statement is itself just a mindful activity. Yes, the I feel statement can be used to communicate with another person. I believe that. But I think a more primary purpose is for my awareness. If I'm using the I feel statement for my awareness, this is what I'm feeling. This is what the triggering event was. This is the belief that led to the feeling. This is what I can control in this moment. This is what I cannot control in this moment. And if I'm with somebody else, they can be present with me too. And so when students resist it because it's not going to open up the gates for them, because they give you an I feel statement or you give them an I feel statement, behavior won't change. That's not its intention anyway. My point is it's just a mindfulness. And that's why I've said, as of late, sometimes I get close to telling parents, don't tell your children how you feel. Because you're in essence just laying it at their feet, making them responsible for it, right? You're responsible for my anxiety. Stop cutting on yourself. Stop restricting your food. Stop doing drugs. Because it upsets me. I'm anxious. I'm scared. I'm worried about you. All those things we imagine come from a place of love. But in this way of thinking, they come from a lack of capacity, right? We're being stretched. So we could practice mindfulness. We could go to a therapist. We could go somewhere to get ourselves taken care of. So that when we show up for our children, we show up for our children. Not showing up for them, asking them to take care of us. That's the work. I've shared this in another webinar previously, but a very common cultural foundational meditation at Evoke is the Lovingkindness meditation. You can Google it. Check it out for yourself. So the Lovingkindness meditation, I'll go over several of the steps. You visualize a sacred space. You ask them to be present in that space. Ask them to take in all the sights, sounds, feelings of that place. You visualize a ball of light radiating from out of you and place it outside of your chest. Then you bring people into the space. You can bring people in that you have conflict with, people that you feel neutral feelings for, people that you feel love and affection for. You can bring in the idea and image of your inner child. And then you imagine their pain and suffering. And you imagine it being manifested as a dark smoke around this person, maybe coming out of their body, maybe coming out of their breath, maybe swirling around them, and you breathe it in. You breathe in this black smoke. And then you allow that ball of light, you breathe into that ball of light and allow that ball of light to metabolize it, right? To burn through it. And you can do that with several people. And the science is in. This reduces stress. This improves kindness in children and adults. It improves empathy, compassion. When people practice this meditation, they're more likely to participate and endorse pro-social behaviors, right? And if you practice it toward yourself, it can be a focused practice of self-care, of self-love, of self-acceptance, which I know some people are afraid. Self-acceptance, when one is doing something that's maladaptive, doesn't seem like it's a very good idea. But it is, because you're going deeper than the behavior. You're going back to the original wound, back to the original fear, back to the original insecurity. So loving kindness meditation is a meditation that we practice program-wide. One therapist shared with me this idea of expansion, which comes from the acceptance and commitment therapy model. Step one, you observe. Scan your body from head to toe, noticing any uncomfortable sensations. Just notice them with curiosity. Begin to notice where it is in your body. Notice where it stops and starts. Is it different in the middle or at the edges? Is it heavy or light? What shape does it have? Really examine it. Step two, breathe. Breathe into it. Slow, deep breaths. Slower the better. With full exhales. Imagine your breath flowing in and around the sensation. Create space. Open up and create space around the feeling, giving it plenty of room to move, shrink, grow, etc. And step four, allow the feeling to be there. Notice the mind's commentary on the feeling. Thank the mind for sharing. Come back to observing. The key here is that we're allowing it, trying not to change or fight it. The idea here is not changing the feeling itself, but to make peace with it and change our relationship with it. I can't help when I read and share those steps with you to just be aware of the fact that doing this to ourselves, developing this practice towards ourselves, is much easier if our parents develop this practice towards us, right? The reason that we have critical, confusing thoughts, insecure thoughts, that we don't know ourselves, that we do battle with the shoulds and the ought tos, is because we were not regarded in this way, this non-judgmental way, and we passed on that wound to our children. right? And we could all argue they give us good reason to be concerned. They give us good reason to be worried about their judgment and their self-sabotage and the dangerous behaviors. Absolutely. That's why they, your children, our children, require more work. So that when we show up, we're capable of showing up for them and their needs and not asking them to take care of ours. Mindful eating, kind of making this transition to the nutrition aspect of tonight's broadcast. Mindful eating. Here's one example of a step-by-step process that we use in the program. Choose a piece of fruit that you enjoy. Take a moment and simply notice the fruit. Notice the color, shape, texture of this food. Pick it up and examine it closely. Put it close to your nose and inhale its aroma. Now close your eyes and slowly take your first bite. Let the flavor unleash in your mouth. Chew it very slowly, noticing the texture and how your teeth bite into it. Continue eating in this manner. When you are finished eating this piece of food, notice any aftertaste. Sit quietly and express gratitude for such a lovely, sensuous experience. One of the challenges, it's not the only thing, one of the challenges in our culture with our relationship with food and weight in our bodies is we don't mindfully eat. Right? We eat while we drive. We eat while we watch television. And those of you who've traveled to Europe know this, or even if you haven't, you've heard this. The amount of drink holders that we need in our cars because of the way that we eat is significantly higher than those in other countries because they tend to be more mindful eaters as cultures, tend to be more mindful eating cultures. And ours, we're not. We don't pay attention to it. So eating disorders themselves, in some ways, can be treated with this tool in connection with other tools and ideas also, but it can be a part of it. We won't overeat as often. We practice it at my men's retreat that I go to. It takes us a lot longer to eat a meal, and we eat a lot less, and we get full and satisfied quicker. It takes 45 minutes to eat a small breakfast when we do it in this manner. And we do it silently, without talking to anybody else. We ask our clients to do it, to be aware of what's happening for them and to them as they eat, and then take that school with them. You know, I talked with our health and wellness director. I talked with our nutrition specialist in our programs, and I asked a lot of questions, and there was too much information to present to you, too technical information. You're welcome to email your parent coordinator if you want more specific information. And I've gotten in trouble before because I've talked about reducing sugar, and some parents will come in and say, well, there's M&Ms in the trail mix, for example, right? Or sometimes we use hot chocolate as a reward at the end of a long day or in the evening. And for some people, that's not a reduction in sugar. For most of our clients and students, our diet is a a significant reduction of sugar, and we try to do that. We reduce preservatives. It's challenging out there because preservatives preserve the food. But we've made some changes around that. We use local and organic when possible. Of course, we have to be sensitive to price competitive foods and food spoiling, like I said. We definitely, for most clients, because of the diet, we create an increase in their intake of fruits and vegetables. I was talking to one of the gentlemen this week who happens to work in a wilderness therapy program, and he was talking about how he shows his clients the movie Finding Joe, among others, a couple of movies while they're with us. I think about it with the books that we give them. You know, many students read more books while at Evoke than they might have read their entire high school career, right? And he said when he gives them his iPad and a speaker to watch Finding Joe, the movie that he offers to them, he says they're riveted to it, right? When I give students books out there, they read voraciously even if they've not had the practice or the discipline. And I think it's because of how rich it becomes, what we take so much for granted, right? We walk around mindlessly all the time. Told the story, but not in this context, before, where a young man came up to us while I was meeting with my staff going over treatment planning for the week, and he said, He said, I don't want to take a shower. I know it's shower day, but I don't want to take a shower. I'm just going to get dirty. And it's so hard to do out here. You got to prepare. You got to heat up the water. You got to go over to the shower place, make a shower place. It's just so uncomfortable, so challenging. And my staff initially started to explain to him, no, you got to do it. And I just said, hold on just a second. I said, it is hard, isn't it? It's uncomfortable out here. And the student listened and felt heard and then just walked away and did it. Not that that would always work that way. And I turned to the staff and I said, that's wilderness therapy, right? You can't take anything for granted. That's why we don't do an adventure model. That's why we don't do a base camp model, because we see the richness in the primitive living nomadic model. It intensifies the flavor of life, right? Reading a book then becomes a rich experience where when we're so stimulated by screens and stimulus in our day-to-day lives, we don't take time to see the richness of something like a documentary on happiness or a book on anger. But I was talking about fruits and vegetables. They become more tasty. They become more desirable. So we absolutely try to make the shift to a healthy diet. We believe that the improvement in the diet has something to do with the kinds of changes that we see at Evoke. We had variety, seasonal fruits and veggies also, and fewer packaged and pre-made foods. Like I said, if you want more information, you can email your parent coordinator and ask them more questions, and they can send you more information. I want to speak about the gut-brain connection, specifically in regard to these books. These are resources that our health and wellness coordinator gave to us. In fact, Elise Mitchell is responsible for a shift in Evoke's philosophy back in 2015-14. So just what the research is telling us about what we eat and how it affects us. And she had a lot of information again, but I pulled out a few. There's 100 million plus neurons in the gut. 70% of our neural tissue is in the gut. The gut regulates muscles, hormones, and immune cell activity. And 90% of serotonin production. That's the neurotransmitter that is associated with depression and anxiety. If you want to learn more about it, you can look through these books, but it makes a difference. I met a researcher in New York years ago who said that they had a study that they created where they changed the diet, changed the amount of sleep somebody got, and changed the amount of screen time that they got. And then they measured their progress in several areas of mental health. And they saw incredible differences. All of those things are inherent in wilderness therapy, right? No screen time at all. You're naturally exhausted at the end of the day because of both physically and emotionally you've done a lot of work. And so you have deep, rich, dream-filled often sleep. And then your diet improves. And I haven't even gotten to the whole process of the challenge of it, the group process, the therapeutic relevance. I think, I've talked to therapists about this, you're a better therapist in the wilderness. And I'll take this back to mindfulness because I had a therapist years ago who worked with us, went away to work at a residential treatment center, and then came back to work with us. When he came back to work with us, he brought 2 clients with him because they were almost done with their stay. But instead of finishing up a month or 2 there, they would finish up a month with us. And he had the blessing and suggestion actually of his treatment program to do that. They thought that was a better move for the family. So he brought the students with him. And this one student who had often blamed and been stuck in his blame, right, being a victim, came into session, and after a few moments, Dave, the therapist, said, I guess I'm just done. We'll just talk next week because we've already had this discussion 100 times. And as Dave stood up to go away, the student said, stop, don't leave. Okay, I'll talk. I'll work at it with you. And it wasn't a threat, it wasn't manipulation. Dave was just, it wasn't going anywhere. But because of the wellness experience, because of how it intensifies everything, he realized he wouldn't get to see Dave for a few days. And he wanted it, right? It sweetened everything. It made everything more flavorful. So in conclusion, what does this have to do with you? Of course, it shares with you some of the things they're working on. but it applies. It can apply to your life. The first idea, of course, is expanding your idea of mindfulness. It's more than just breathing silent meditation. Learning to lean into the pain and the unwanted feelings in our lives, and the healing that happens to that both with a mindful practice and with psychotherapy. Developing awareness, right? Increasing awareness. It's related to developing a healthier and more complete and integrated self, right? Making friends with your darkness, making friends with the things that shame wants to prevent you from making friends with in yourself. Provides tools for clients that transfer out of the back country and into the front country, as they say. Remember that therapy itself is a mindful practice. It's not a silent one, but it's a mindful one. And you can try it. A daily reader, a mantra meditation when you're feeling anxiety. Therapy yourself, going to meetings, sharing what's going on for you. All of those mindfulness practices. Breathing meditations can help you. Lovingkindness meditations can help you. Even the shift toward how you regard yourself, your own mistakes, your own humanness, makes you a better, more effective parent. And I said this earlier, but the idea that there's a relationship between a mindfulness practice and healthy attachment. If we all had healthy attachment, this would all be easier for us. We would know that we're okay. We would be honest and authentic in our relationships. We wouldn't be taken advantage of. We wouldn't be confused or questioning so much. We would know ourselves. We would speak our truth. Shame wouldn't prevent us. Guilt wouldn't prevent us from doing the right thing like they do now. And the impact that that personness, that suchness, would have on the other people around us would, of course, be very positive. All right, I'm happy to take any live questions that have come in. So, first question. Taking care of yourself is taking care of the world. My eyes popped out of my head at your comments. I learned more about the importance of self-care on my daughter's last visit home. She experimented with some autonomy, and the struggles between me and my husband were heightened. I was struggling in so many ways, but for the first time in a long time, I was able to say, I need to meditate right now, and I need some time. My husband is not in tune with this practice. From doing work, I was able to do this for myself anyway. I was also able to not accept invitations to arguments, not from a place of retreat, but from a place of self-care. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much for sharing with me and with us, with other parents, the impact that it has on your life. And I'm going to give you 20 seconds of just my passion. This is stuff will change the world. It will change your world. And it will have ripple effects. And it's not intuitive. And I urge you to do your own work. Not out of a place of shame or fear or guilt, but out of a place of love. Love for yourself. Maybe it starts with love for your child. And the whole equation changes. So thank you for sharing with us an example of how it's happening in your life. Next question. Is psychotherapy without mindfulness and body awareness lacking in helping me? No, I think psychotherapy itself is mindfulness. Right? Psychotherapy itself is going into a room and a therapist saying, if they're adequate, saying what's going on for you. And then you share with them any crazy, neurotic complaint that you have about the world, about your child, about life, about yourself, about anything. And they hear you, and they understand you, and they find you. And in finding you comes the healing. And then whatever your neurotic behavior is, you work more on healing and grieving the wound than on behavioral change. Just like we talk about with our children. So if it's adequate psychotherapy, it is a mindfulness practice. Even if they don't use what we associate with typical body work or typical mindfulness exercises, it in itself is a mindfulness practice. I also got that from a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Mindfulness and Psychotherapy. I did a broadcast on that also. It's an audio book, by the way. It's not in written form, so you can find it on Amazon, Audible, or wherever audiobooks are sold. Mindfulness and Psychotherapy by Thich Nhat Hanh. All right. All right, let's do some upcoming events and then see if there are any other questions. We would like all parents to go to 6 12-step support groups. I loved what some of the men commented on this week. They said it was nice for all of us to do this work that we ask other people to do. It gives you empathy. You walk into a room, you're exposed and vulnerable and scared and anxious. You have all the same thoughts that all of your children have when they get sent to us. All of these broadcasts are, of course, available on the podcast app. So on the iPhone or an iOS device, just go to the podcast app and search Evoke Therapy Programs. If you have an Android device, download the SoundCloud app, or on a computer, any computer, you can go to soundcloud.com and search Evoke Therapy Programs. Twitter and Instagram, find us at Evoke Therapy. Facebook, search Evoke Therapy Programs. You can find the Evoke Family Foundation on Facebook. This is an organization that helps parents give back to people who can't maybe afford or get treatment. New content is constantly on our Evoke Therapy blog. My book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, is a journey through, in some ways, this work that I was talking about today, being present with yourself, developing a self, and then being present with your child as a result of that. Currently, it's not available in the Amazon warehouse, so just click on the new icon under the paperback, and you can order it from Evoke Therapy Programs. You can also buy a Kindle version or an audio version. The next intensive, I think there's a couple of spots left. If any of this makes sense to you, if you want a deeper dive into this, you want to do something courageous that you've asked your child to do, come to Finding You. Right? Finding You is a 4.5-day intensive search into self. The next one is June 6th to 10th. I think there's a couple of spots. August 15th through 19th after that. Finding You 2, we just announced, is coming October 10th through 14th. So those spots will go according to how people respond. If you want to come to Finding You 2, let us know by emailing us at intensives@evoketherapy.com. Coming soon, we're going to create an intensive for graduates of our program, students and clients, 18 and older. Even if they weren't 18 when they were with us, they can come if they've turned 18. So we're going to create an intensive for our alumni. And then, of course, private family intensives can be created for your family, 2.5 to 4.5 days. We have groups, like I just shared with you, for professionals, therapeutic professionals. So there's a women's group coming up May 20th through 22nd. That was full. There may have been a spot that opened up. We might have had somebody that canceled. So contact us if you're interested at this one or a subsequent one. And then I know there are spots left in the June 10th through 12th men's workshop. Parent support groups. Next one's coming up May 12th, this Saturday in Seattle. I'll be in Denver May 14th, 7 to 9 p.m. Invite your friends to either one of these. These are smaller areas for us, so we're opening it up to anybody that wants to come and do any kind of parent work. And then I'll be back in New York City on Monday, June 4th at my usual location, 7 to 9 p.m. In Midtown at CUNY, City University of New York. Email melanie@evoketherapy.com for more information or to RSVP to those. The next workshop, we would like all current families that can come to the next workshop. It's at Entrada, June 23rd and 24th. If you can combine that with a visit to your child, talk to your therapist about that, your child's therapist, and see if that's appropriate. Contact Gail@evoketherapy.com for more information. Pursuits trips are adventure trips for families and young adults. Think of therapy light, sober fun, 7 to 14-day trips, any kind of recreational activities. And then I'm happy to take any live questions on any topic. Is this alumni intensive that I just mentioned, is this new to Evoke? Absolutely, it's new to Evoke. Right? I just thought of it 2 weeks ago, so we have never done one, and I've been asked for years. Again, I'm probably going to do it the same way that we did with the Finding You. I'm going to send out an email, Finding You 2, excuse me. I sent out to all graduates of the Finding You program and asked if they would be interested in certain dates, and we got a great response, so we put it on the calendar. I'll do the same thing with the alumni, where I'll send it out to all of our graduates in the last 3 years. That's a huge list, and ask if any are interested in certain dates. So Another question comes in regarding internet cults, how to handle post-willers. I haven't seen that topic. Thanks so much. My son is 15. It's a complex question. I've actually had a situation with that, with a former client of mine, and worked with a parent on that. The vulnerability around a cult, right? The vulnerability around a cult is a vulnerability. That's what we treat. What's the vulnerability? A lack of self, right? An insecurity, wanting to identify with something bigger, being drawn to something that gives one a sense of power and sense of safety because of the rules and the sacrifice that is required. So, in a way, and I can't do it justice in just the question and answer period, you lean into the womb. You understand the child. You know that just like this with any other symptom behavior, that there's a reason for it, a good reason for it. And so you focus on the reason. You have empathy for it. You honor the defense. You honor the symptom and what it's serving. And I would say, I think it takes a lot of work, right? There were no 1, 2, 3 steps that I could give to the family to extricate their child from the process. But we rather deal with and treat the vulnerabilities that would make somebody susceptible to that, or to other relationships that are abusive, corrosive, damaging, right? That take too much from the child. Is a pursuits trip something kids do with their families post-wilderness? Are the dates figured out for this summer? Right now, we don't have any scheduled trips, but they're customized. So we've had families do wilderness and intensives and pursuits. So you just email us and you say, we'd love to do fly fishing, mountain biking. We'd love one of your trips to Nepal or Central America to do service and some hiking and trekking. You just kind of tell us what you're looking for, what are the ages, how long you want to be gone, and then we set up a trip for you with our guides, and then we take care of all the logistics. And we send somebody along with you, so it's not just the fun, but you're processing at night. You're talking as a family. You're creating teaching moments and putting them under a magnifying glass, if you will. So they're customized right now. We do have some specific trips that were designed so you can do those, or you can create one on your own. And really any country in the world where we're capable of going. And then it looks like the last comment is, thanks, Brad, for all you do for kids and families. You help us complete ourselves. It is my therapist. Thank you. You're welcome. My therapist said to me today when I was talking about this kind of self-care issue, and we were describing it, and she was saying, you know, for her, and I relate to her, I just want to do for you what someone did for me. That's all I want to do. Somebody, specifically my therapist, and to some extent my wife, showed me compassion, saw me, found me. And I'm not easy, right? I take up a lot of space. I'm difficult. I have lots of cranky feelings, and I'm impatient and controlling and neurotic and all kinds of things. And so somebody saw me. And in finding me and seeing me, I realized that I was okay. That I wasn't the problem that I thought I was. I had wounds and mistakes and imperfections, but when I felt found and seen, it healed so much of me. So I just want to do that for you and for your children and for professionals. I just have to make sure in the process that I take good care of myself, because I can't do it if I don't do that. The next webinar, the next broadcast will be next Wednesday, May 16th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and it's getting the support. It's one of the very first webinars I did in 2007. Getting the support you need and deserve. So we'll be revisiting that next week. So thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for and on behalf of your children for your willingness to step into something. It's the best way you can honor them and their work. It's the best way you can encourage their work, is to meet them in this place where we're all trying to get healed. So have a great evening. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.